Greetings, everybody, and welcome to the Art of the Ages. So, I wanted to kind of delve into just a little bit of just like super practical discussion right now, and that's for those of us who work. I guess the way to put it is in a medium that necessitates somebody actually looking at our words, and there's so much of writing now that is not like that at all, right? I mean, there's always been drama, and and there's always been this kind of performance writing, right, where people are hearing your words and maybe even seeing the things that you've described, but that are not actually looking at your words on a page. That's really expanded because, I mean, one of the biggest mediums today is online video. I mean, we've added television and we've added movies, and now we're adding internet video, internet drama, streaming, and these sort of things, and goodness, podcasting. How did I forget that? How was that not the first thing that I mentioned? I did, but yeah. So there's so many different ways that technology has allowed us to express our writing in ways that are not specifically written on the page. And even then, it's like, I'm starting to work on an audiobook version of one of my novels, and so it's even though this was written to be read off the page, now it's going to be introduced to a whole new audience who are not seeing it that way, and so there. Long story short, too late. The way that technology has expanded has also expanded our potential as writers. But a lot of us are still writing to be seen on the page. And this adds another element to our work that we need to be aware of. And that's how our writing looks. Right. So a lot of that is up to the publisher, and that publisher could be us, so some of us are writing articles and works online. Some of us are self-publishing. I fall into that camp, where we are picking our own fonts. We are picking our own font size and that sort of thing. But traditionally the publisher picks all these things and tries to set it up as efficiently as possible. As I get older, I frequently complain about publishers making the font too small, but that saves money on paper, so they're going to keep doing that. It was one of the great things about ebooks now is that you can pick your own font size and sometimes your own font. That's really great. So sometimes that is under our control, but there's a lot of it that is under our control from the very start, and that is the amount of variation we have in paragraphs, the amount of white space that we include. And the amount and the way we begin sentences, and specifically begin paragraphs, and so there's a lot of things that we can do in there that is either going to distract the reader or make the page more attractive. And and oddly enough, even though we do work in a form of art, like all forms of art, that is taking the chaotic and putting order to it, it's variety that people really find attractive in this. It's like I actually still have by my computer here the Mist book that I was showing off several episodes ago. I have not moved the book, but you can look at the books that you have, and you see a very nice variety in paragraph length. You can, as you glance over it, what you normally first notice is the shape of the paragraph and the white space. Now, white space actually helps for tension, and there's there's been a lot of cases where you just need a really long paragraph, and some writers write longer paragraphs than others. And there are advantages to doing that and disadvantages. One of the disadvantages is that it is harder to retain when you have that little white space, when the page is just full, and that's also one of the problems with smaller fonts. I mean, not just the fact that it is literally harder to read, and especially for people of my age, but the smaller fonts will crowd the page and make it more difficult to retain. But mostly it's the paragraph shapes that provide the white space. There are also breaks that also will also create white space. So, like as I flip through, I have a page break, or break in the page. I know page break is a technical term that means you break to the next page, and so I should say a break in the page where there is a symbol notating the break and a lot of white space around it. And then you also have the end of paragraphs and the start of new paragraphs that also have a lot of white space around them. There are certain authors and certain very good authors that will avoid these things completely. And so, we mustn't make this a hard and fast rule. I've written books with a variety of different chapter lengths, and there's a reason that I do it in each case, but there should be a reason. That's one of the important things, is there should be a reason for it. And we should think about it. So the paragraph size, there's very few things that are more distracting than all the paragraphs looking the same. And we normally don't do this when we write longer paragraphs of at least a few sentences in length. That naturally provides some variety, but there are certain more recent authors that well, the way we always joke is they write in tweets, and each sentence is a paragraph, and even then the sentence is quite short, and so it's just like it looks more like a list than anything. It's one line, maybe two. One line, two lines, two lines, and there's a monotony to it on the page, and so there should be a nice variety there. The next thing we're going to notice is the first word of each paragraph. That's easily the most noticeable word, and so we need to pay special care there that we're not repetitive in that, and that's tough to do. Because, it's especially because our sentences often begin with the subject of the sentence, which is a noun, and a lot of nouns that we use are nouns that would require an article in front of them. It's quite easy to fall in the trap of having 4 paragraphs in a row begin with the word "the." That has happened to me a lot, and when we read this out loud, when we have the audiobook version, when we have the script format of something like that, that kind of repetition really isn't noticeable. It is not all that noticeable if you start a lot of sentences with a word as insignificant as a, an, or the. But when they all line up on the page, that's when it really pops. And so when you read it, especially when you read it out loud, it's not that big of a deal. But when you see it like that, the eye is drawn to it and becomes a distraction. And so there's a time when I'm editing a book that I look at it. And This is really drifting into the weird. Like I look at the page, but I just get a sense of it. If this is becoming too crowded, if this is pleasing to the eye, in the fact that it's not distracting, if I'm not having those first words in the paragraphs line up perfectly along the left side of the page, making sure that there's nothing in there that's just going to really distract the reader, unless I want it to. Okay, so that's the point where we might really vary. So a lot of times what we might do in this case is capitalize a word that doesn't normally need the capitalization, but we're going to do it. And that draws attention to the word. Now here we also have the effect of when I'm reading it, when I read it out loud, when I'm doing the audio version of it, how do I communicate that? And I normally don't. If I have a script, then it doesn't come across. And this is like when, and it's like, and I really enjoyed I guess it's not all that recent, but maybe 15 years ago, somewhere around there, the movie version of The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. But there's one scene where it just falls flat on its face, and it can't help but do so. But in the book, when the kids, or three of them at least, first hear the name Aslan, there's this description there where you get a sense of the weight of the name and how it affects them. And it's a very important moment. And C.S. Lewis draws attention to that word. Now, in the movie, they look like doofuses. As great as that film is, they look like idiots because they kind of sheepishly grin and look at each other, but we're not sure why unless we've read the book, and it just kind of looks out of place. Like they made, and I love that they made a valiant effort, but it's a different genre, it's a different medium, and we don't communicate the same way in different mediums. And so the filmmaker really should have realized that and done something else there. Perhaps even skipped it completely. Despite the fact that it's one of our, a lot of us is one of our favorite parts of the book, but it just doesn't translate. And that happens a lot. I mean, this has nothing to do with the topic, but Stanley Kubrick changed the topiary bushes in The Shining into hedge maze. It was magnificent. It was great. And then when Stephen King wrote his adaptation of The Shining later, in the 90s, I think it was, he did the topiary bushes. And they're terrifying in the novel, but in the movie, they're stupid. They're ridiculous. They're joke. Because it's a different medium. It doesn't communicate in the same way. We can't do the same things in different mediums. And this is one of the advantages that the author of the written page has, but also one of the disadvantages, because we've got to keep in mind, how does the page look? Whereas a script, you don't really have to worry about that. In writing a podcast, you don't have to worry about that. In writing any sort of audio or visual form, you don't have to worry about that as much. But we also have the advantage of being able to use that page to our advantage. So another thing that can be done is, like the use of all caps. Now, that's dramatic. And even the use of small cap, that really pops out of the page. And it's going to be a really big distraction. And so it's something that I don't believe I've ever used in a book or in a story. Simply because I think it's too much of a distraction for what I'm going for. But the use of italics, again, embolding a word might be too much of a punch, because it's the second you get to that page, it doesn't matter. It could be on the facing page at the very bottom, but you're looking over there. Whereas the italicized word has a little bit more. It's a little bit more subtle. The capital, the word that has the initial letter capitalized is a bit more subtle. You're not going to look at that from the facing page. When you get to that paragraph, you're going to see it. But these are things. Setting the single word aside in its own paragraph has a punch to it, and this is how you can use the look of the page to your advantage. So that's helpful. This is something I actually really enjoyed. I really enjoy. I like the way if a good author uses the look of a page to his advantage, I think it's a really cool effect and a really cool approach. And so something to play around with, to experiment with. And so we're going to leave it at that today. We will be back next week. I really do appreciate all of you who tune in week after week. Thank you so much. Remember, those of you who watch on YouTube, we do have this in podcast form. And those of you on the podcast side, we do have this on YouTube. And so if you want to look at me while I drone on about this stuff, then you certainly can. Or if you don't want to, but you still want to hear what I have to say, that's totally okay. I really do appreciate it. So thank you. And until next time, never, never, never quit telling stories to one another. Thank you very much.